Hanli possesses the jingli bamboo. Its exposure means a great war between Tian Nan and the Mulan people is imminent. In order to obtain the golden lightning bamboo, the Mulan people have set their sights on Hanli. Whether he's dead or alive doesn't matter. Meanwhile, the Tian Nan cultivators are also discussing a strategy to face the enemy. Inside the Tian Nan main camp, Ziyang, Reverend Ziyang, Wei Wuya, and others are also in a large hall, also discussing matters of the Great War, but there were fewer people than on the Spellmaster's side. Besides the three great cultivators and Long Han, there was also a beautiful woman in a red robe present, and a gloomy, bald, white-bearded old man. This old man's eyes were half closed. On a finger of one of his hands, he wore a jade ring. This ring was a vibrant, emerald green, with raised patterns appearing on its surface. It looked to be a rare treasure. This time, everything depends on you, few fellow Taoists. We will hold down the main force of the Spellmaster's army here. You just need to advance into controlling Heaven City, and plunder all the resource warehouses. Without the spirit stones, the Mulan people painstakingly collected materials and other resources. Even if the Mulan people can gain the upper hand in the Great War, but afterwards, we can just drag things out and completely wear them down, the Reverend said with a smile. It was as if with the old man before him, the infamous old monster Tian Nan. In days past, no unpleasantness had ever occurred at all. As long as you all can hold the Mulan Divine Masters at the border, sneaking into Tinian City will naturally be no problem. What's more, we have the teleportation array provided by Wei Dao, which can teleport us directly into the city. This makes the matter all the more simple. My only concern is, however, why would the Mulan people leave all their resources inside the city? Could it be a trap, just waiting for us to fall right into it? The yin-eyed old man spoke with a voice like clashing metal. It was very harsh on the ears. You need not worry about this, fellow Taoist Tian Nan. According to a message from our spy among the Mulan people, although the Mulan tribe has occupied Fengyuan country and Yu country, 2 nations in total, but because the Nine Kingdom alliance beforehand had already made preparations to withdraw, all the temporary raw material production sites were destroyed. Their mages arranged for Mulan commoners to rush the repairs, but because the time was too short, the number of repaired sites is extremely small. It's completely useless. The temporary resources they are consuming now are actually the private stockpiles contributed by their various clans. These items are to be distributed and used centrally, so they are all stored in a secret warehouse. A powerful restrictive grand formation was specially set up, and it's guarded by several great high masters simultaneously. That is why they are so at ease. After all, should an irresistible force attack the resource warehouse, they can rely on that restrictive formation to delay things, giving them enough time to move the items in the warehouse. Theoretically, it should be as secure as a fortress. Old Devil Hewan also said calmly, but what they never, ever expected was that our 9 Nations Alliance has been dealing with the Mulan people for a very long time. They can send spies to infiltrate our state of Yue, and our 9 Nations Alliance can also plant people among their spellcasters. One of the great high masters guarding the resource warehouse is our inside man. When the time comes, he will disable the Grand Formation's restrictions. Fellow Taoist Tian Nan, as long as your movements are stealthy enough, you can completely catch them off guard, Wuya said with a sneer. Since you fellow Taoists are so certain, then it seems I have no choice but to make this trip. After this is accomplished, our 4 great powers will make the decision. We will specifically assign the state of Su to you, fellow Taoist. Then, fellow Taoist, you can establish your own sect in this state. Our 4 great powers will absolutely not interfere in the slightest. From then on, you, fellow Taoist, can also be called the patriarch of a sect, Long Han said with a smile. It's good to have the assurances of you all. This old man and my few good friends say that we can only give it our all and try. It is getting late. I shall return and make some preparations. We will depart early tomorrow morning. First, we will infiltrate the territory of the Yu Kingdom. Old freak Tian Nan once again, from the group, received the promise that he wanted. He showed a look of satisfaction, but he also had no intention of staying for long. He bid his farewell and left the hall. Soon, his figure vanished from the entrance of the hall. This old freak's chances of success are not small, are they? After all, besides him, those rogue gold cultivators he brought with him are each possessed of considerable abilities. With the Mulan people caught off guard, there should be no reason for him to fail. Old demon, He Huan frowned slightly, and said slowly, fellow Taoist is correct. As long as we truly manage to pin down the Mulan Divine Masters, fellow Taoist Tian Nan should have a 70 to 80% chance of success. I just did not expect that this old freak, at his age, would suddenly think of establishing his own sect, and on top of that, he even roped in so many rogue cultivators to bolster his cause. It is truly somewhat unexpected, Long Han also said, his eyes glinting. This is quite normal. Old demon Tian Nan entered the mid-Nascent Soul stage. It has been 300 or 400 years, right? After such a long time, he has still been unable to break through. He has probably given up all hope of reaching the late stage. He began to take an interest in other matters. There is nothing strange about that, and to become the master of a sect is a great honor that brings immense status. However, this person usually has many dealings with the major sects. That is why he took this opportunity to negotiate terms with us. Their arrival can be considered a welcome reinforcement. The Zenith Master said leisurely, "Alright, although we have old demon Tian Nan as a backup plan. But in the great battle that is about to begin, we cannot be careless. It is best if we strive for victory. If we truly suffer a major rout in a single battle, even if the Mule and Spell Masters lose their resource support, we will still be unable to stop them. Regarding official matters, brother, your 9 Nations Alliance, those restrictive seals that counter the Spirit Spell formation, there are no issues, are there? This is the Spell Master's most commonly used tactic in chaotic battles." Zenith Master Jiang's expression turned serious. He asked Sui Wuya, "After fighting against the Spell Masters for so many years, our understanding of the Spirit Spell formation is not inferior to those below the level of a Formation Master. If it were not for the problems with our cultivation techniques, our 9 Nations Alliance could even set up a spiritual arts formation identical to that of the Mulan people. So, you need not worry about this, fellow Taoist," Wei Wuyi said calmly. Reverend Jiang was greatly pleased to hear this. Although he said nothing, his gaze turned to the large man in the black robe. Seeing this, old devil Hewan also spoke nonchalantly. "Our 6 sects of the demonic path are fully prepared. Not only has the Yulin sect brought its 3 sect guarding beasts, our Hewan sect has also made preparations for the Yin-Yang to unseal the twin devils. The Ghost Spirit sect's 10,000 souls grand formation can be activated at any moment. As for the other 3 sects, they have other powerful techniques to unleash. As for you, fellow Taoist Jiang, I wonder what kind of trump cards your alliance has prepared." The old devil said coldly, "Our Righteous Path Alliance, long before we set out, each of our sects and schools has already opened their respective ancestral halls. We have brought out over a dozen types of ancient artifacts with immense power. We certainly will not disappoint you, fellow Taoist." Reverend Jiang's words were very simple, but old devil Hewan's expression softened as he nodded. It seemed he knew of those ancient artifacts and what they were capable of. Our Heavenly Tao Alliance is very loosely organized, but the various sects within the alliance have also made their own preparations. However, I am not clear on the specific methods they will use, but our Lambing sect has taken out a few ancient jade talismans from its collection. Their divine powers are immense. They will surely be an eye-opener for the Mulan spell masters. It's just that they are too ancient, so not much of their power remains. They will likely be useless after this battle, Long Hanshin said to himself, a look of regret on his face. Ancient jade talismans. I didn't expect the Lambing sect to still possess such treasures. Presumably, the Heavenly Tao Alliance and the other sects won't disappoint us with their methods either. The only thing to worrying about now are those people in black robes and the matter of the wagered battle. Regarding those black-robed people, the techniques they use are also demonic techniques. Fellow Taoist, are you unable to accurately identify their techniques? Origin, after pondering for a moment, Revered Jiang asked hesitantly, just because they cultivate demonic techniques, does that mean I'm supposed to know them? The characteristics of those black-robed people's techniques were described to me by a fellow Taoist from the 9 Nations Alliance. I did not see them with my own eyes. How could I possibly make an accurate judgment? The only thing that is certain is that these people's demonic arts seem to be much more pure and sophisticated than those of our 6 sects of Tian Nan, and their techniques somewhat resemble those of the Ghost Spirit sect's lineage. The big man in the black robe replied irritably to the Ghost Spirit sect. The exact number of these people in black robes is unknown, but in the Battle of Tiantiancheng alone, as many as 7 or 8 of them appeared, and all of them were Nascent Soul cultivators. This is clearly a group of cultivators from the same sect. A sect that can possess so many demonic cultivators could only be a demonic sect from that state. Could they really be from the Great Jin state? Revered Ziyang analyzed, his expression turning grim. When the others heard what Revered Ziyang said, none of them showed any surprise. It seems they all had the same suspicion. HMPH. So, what if they're cultivators from the Jin state? Look at this group of black-robed people, skulking around, with such a furtive appearance, as if they fear being seen, meddling in the affairs of our Tian Nan cultivation world. It must be just one of their demonic sects, or perhaps it's merely the intention of a few people from the Zemo sect. What is there to be afraid of? We just need to treat them as a routine matter, and act as if we don't know the whole story. The beautiful woman in red, who had been silent all this time, suddenly spoke. The voice was cold, yet crisp and pleasant. What Lady Feng said is reasonable, even if it is truly some demonic sect from the Jin Kingdom, fully supporting the Mulan people. The enemy we face is merely a bit stronger. Surely we're not just going to hand Tian Nan over to them, are we? The Shangren said in agreement. That is indeed true, but the cultivators of the Jin Kingdom, whether in techniques or treasures, are somewhat stronger than our Tian Nan cultivators. This is undeniable. If these demonic cultivators participate in tomorrow's stake duel, and secretly pull some tricks, that could be quite troublesome. The Jin Kingdom has countless secret cultivation techniques. Many of them are impossible to guard against. Old demon, He Huan said with a grave expression. Don't worry. I've already considered this point. Do you still remember our Taisian sect's mirror-shattering pearls? Mirror-shattering pearls. You mean that one-time used magical artifact for breaking through barriers? Isn't that kind of thing only effective against low-level barriers? Besides, the barrier during the duel is so strong even a Nascent Soul cultivator would have to put in some effort to break it. That kind of magical artifact, what use could it possibly have? Longhan asked in astonishment. If we were talking about the original mirror-shattering pearls, they indeed couldn't do anything against high-level barriers. But what you don't know, Brother Long, those restriction-breaking beads left outside were not actually fully refined. They were all just semi-finished products. The real restriction-breaking beads not only require several exceptionally precious materials to be added, but they are also difficult to refine. However, they have a remarkable effect on breaking high-level restrictions. Of course, their uses are limited. That's why our sect has never refined many of them. But now, for the sake of those fellow Taoists participating in the gambling battle, our sect managed to gather 10 of them. As long as they carry these beads, if the situation turns against them, they can immediately use them to break through the restrictions and escape. This way, they will have nothing to worry about. The Reverend said with great confidence. I was wondering why you, fellow Taoist, knew it was risky, yet were not worried about tomorrow's gambling battle at all. So, you had this backup plan. With the restriction-breaking beads, even if the other side pulls any tricks, we don't need to be afraid. However, to be on the safe side, our demonic Tao Heavenly Fiend sect has a secretly formulated pill called the Grey Whistle Pill. Taking it can stimulate the true essence in one's body, allowing depleted magic power to be restored by more than half almost instantly. It also increases one's power by a bit. Of course, after the medicinal effect wears off, it will definitely damage one's vital energy to some extent. We can have each of these fellow cultivators carry one pill as well. If the situation becomes truly critical, they can take it suddenly as a surprise tactic. After Old Demon, He Huan agreed with revered Master Zi Yang's words. He added, brilliant. With these two safety nets, Long Mao also felt at ease. Long Han chuckled lightly, but his tone changed as he spoke again. Now, I should consider how to deal with those people in black robes. These people cultivate demonic techniques. It would be best for the Righteous Path Alliance to select a group of cultivators to deal with these demonic practitioners. After all, among the sects like the Taisian sect, there are many arts that specifically counter demonic techniques. They should be just as effective against these demonic cultivators. As Long Han spoke, he glanced at revered Master Ziyang to see how he would respond. No problem. Leave these demonic cultivators to our Righteous Path Alliance, but the masters among the spellcasters will have to be mostly handled by your side. Revered Master Ziyang showed no intention of backing down, and agreed in one go. Of course, as for the spellcasters, we, the three great powers, will handle them. And so, it was settled. Revered Master Ziyang unhesitatingly agreed to deal with the demonic cultivators of the Jin Kingdom. The rest of them were greatly satisfied. They discussed among themselves for a long time. They didn't disperse with peace of mind until sunset. These people acted according to the results of their discussion. Each returned to make their own preparations. The day of the decisive battle arrived in the blink of an eye. Early in the morning on this day, the patrolling cultivators saw that in the opposing mage's main camp, flashes of immortal light flickered. Then, the earth-shattering sound of rumbling drums arose. Pairs of mages flew out of the camp unhurriedly. They headed towards the center of the border on their magical artifacts. These cultivators, who were already prepared, hurriedly activated their transmission talismans. A moment later, from the main camp of the Tian Nan side, a long, drawn-out toll of a bell was heard. Afterwards, the many cultivators, who had long been conserving their energy and waiting, poured out of the camp one after another. They transformed into countless streaks of light and soared into the sky, heading towards the same location, blanketing the sky. For a moment, spiritual lights of all colors filled the sky. The sounds of clashing weapons and long roars rose and fell, and from the other direction came the menacing army of mages. It was as if two monstrous waves were crashing towards each other, but when they were still several miles apart, both sides suddenly came to an abrupt halt, whether it was the mages or the cultivators, at a distance where they could vaguely see each other. They stopped their escaping lights in unison, then they stared at each other hostilely from afar. One side had no path of retreat. Only by fighting with their backs to the wall could the entire group forge a path out. The other side had long resided in their homeland. They would not tolerate a foreign invasion. Their morale was also exceptionally high. Neither side had made a move yet, but a heaven-shaking killing intent was already forming between the two armies. It spread and rose. At this moment, Hanli was floating above a troop of more than 1,000 cultivators. He looked towards the grand army of mages in the distance. In a single glance, the opposing side was a sea of multicolored light. Within each patch of light were several hundred mages gathered together, and this glow stretched for miles on end. Clearly, both sides had deployed their main forces. Although it was impossible to estimate the exact numbers, at least gathered in this place were more than 60 to 70,000 cultivators, and high-level cultivators, who were rarely seen under normal circumstances, were now absolutely everywhere. However, although their numbers were roughly equal, one could still tell the difference between the two sides' mages. One side, although their attire was varied, had low-level mages whose magical artifacts were all of just a few simple types. They were either hazy orbs of light, or fist-sized round beads, but the most numerous were pull after pull of magical flags of various colors, while blade and sword-type magical artifacts were few and far between. On the cultivator's side, however, the magical artifacts in the cultivators' hands were incredibly diverse. They had all sorts of things, but they were predominantly blade and sword-type artifacts. However, these magical artifacts all glittered brightly, radiating with immense spiritual energy. In terms of quality alone, it was clear they far surpassed those of the mages. Although in terms of magical artifacts, the mages' side was far inferior to the Tian Nan cultivators, but the mages' ranks were orderly and stable. Even while flying through the air, they still maintained a profound formation. Each one of them was silent, only staring over with gazes full of hostility. The cultivators, on the other hand, were clearly undertrained. Although they barely maintained their formation, it was chaotic and disorderly. Not only was there constant whispering, but from time to time, people would also break away, leaving the ranks to do their own thing. This forced those high-ranked cultivators to have to come down and scold them. He frowned upon seeing this. It was no wonder. In just a few months' time, how could it be possible to properly train so many unruly cultivators? Merely getting these cultivators to line up in formation was already a massive headache for the high-ranking cultivators. The opposing mage army, however, was different. Although it was also composed of a coalition army from numerous Mulan tribes, they frequently battled the two Wu people. For the mages of the various tribes, forming a joint army was a common occurrence. With just a little coordination, they would become well-disciplined. These matters, the high-level leaders of the cultivators were well aware of, but there was also nothing they could do. Fortunately, they were immortal cultivators, not like a secular army. The key to determining victory did not lie in this, so they simply turned a blind eye to it. As he was thinking this, he sized up the mage army a few more times. The most eye-catching thing on the opposing side was not the Mulan mages, but rather, within the mage army, were over 10 abnormally large and savage behemoths. They were interspersed among the ranks of the mage army, their bodies like small mountains, truly conspicuous. Many of the cultivators from the righteous path had witnessed the might of these behemoths before. Therefore, a great many gazes were cast upon these giant beasts, and a trace of fear arose. Hanli raised his head to look at the sky. The sky was clear for miles, without a single cloud. Then he lowered his head and looked at the disorganized formation of cultivators under his banner. He sighed and shook his head. Then, with a flip of his hand, two small items appeared in his palm: a thumb-sized, jet black, round bead, and a fiery red, pungent, square-shaped medicinal pill. It was about the size of an almond. These two items were from revered Ziyang last night. He had sent someone to deliver them, and had explained their effects and uses. It was said that every cultivator participating in the high-stakes battle received them. Hanli was a little surprised, but he accepted them without hesitation. It seems that in order to defeat the spellcaster's army, the three great sects were truly bringing out all their treasures. Some things that were previously hidden away have been brought out in considerable numbers this time. However, it wasn't just the three great sects doing so. Thinking of this, Hanli couldn't help but look down below, towards another adjacent group of cultivators. This group consisted of about 1,000 people. In their midst were men and women cultivators wearing red and green two-colored robes. There were 16 of each. They were carrying two enormous coffins. They were lined up side by side in black and white attire. On top of the coffins, they were covered with all sorts of large and small talismans. There were dozens of them. It was an extremely bizarre sight. Hanli also recognized these male and female cultivators. They were disciples of the He1 sect, the number 1 sect of the demonic path. This made Hanli very curious about the two coffins. Unfortunately, he had tried to probe them with his divine sense along the way, but the coffins had clearly been placed under an incredibly powerful restriction, making it completely impenetrable. Besides these two coffins, in the other cultivator processions, some strange and eye-catching things had appeared. For instance, the cultivators from a certain righteous path sect on the other side were gathered around a roughly 6 to 7 jong high bronze platform. On the platform was a huge bronze gong, about a jong in diameter. The surface of the gong shimmered with a brilliant golden light, and from time to time, white, floating patterns would appear on it. Nearby, there was a bare-chested giant of a man, sitting cross-legged beside it with his eyes tightly shut. In some of the processions further away, there were over a dozen jet-black statues. They were 3 to 4 jong high, and seemed to be somewhat damaged. It had the appearance of an ancient, ferocious beast. It was being dragged through the air by some flying chariots, looking incredibly lifelike. Its purpose was unknown. As for the cultivator ranks further away, there were also some strange and peculiar things appearing. Seeing all this, Hanli felt much more at ease. This showed that all the sects knew this battle was no small matter. They had all brought out their most treasured artifacts. As a result, the chances of victory naturally increased greatly. Moreover, besides these treasures that were on display, who knew how many other powerful treasures were hidden away in the storage bags of those sect cultivators, and were hidden from view. But in the mage's army, apart from those giant beasts, there didn't seem to be anything else. Hanli refused to believe the mage's tricks were limited to just this. They must have some powerful killing moves hidden away. Whether this great battle would be won or lost, it was truly difficult to predict. At this time, the cultivators who had been arriving in a continuous stream, and the mage's army had finally all assembled. Afterwards, except for a few people, most of them landed on the ground in unison, and it began to fall deathly silent. Just then, after a commotion in the opposing mage's army, 3 people flew out from within. The steadfast elders arrived, eternally vigorous. They were the 3 great divine masters of the Mulan. And on the cultivator's side, 3 startling streaks of light also flew out. It was Supreme Yang, Wei Wuya, and Old Devil He1, the 3 of them. When the 2 sides were several dozen yards apart, they all stopped their flight and came to a halt. Well, fellow Taoists, it's not too late to change your minds now. As long as you cede half of the heavenly south to our Mulan tribe, we can cease hostilities and turn from foes to friends. Otherwise, after this battle, regardless of who wins or loses, your heavenly south cultivation world will likely suffer a great loss of vitality, I'm afraid. Zhang Yi and Resheng looked at Wei Wuya and the others opposite him, and said coldly, "What a joke. It is true that our heavenly south cultivation world will suffer a great loss of vitality. But if you Mulan people lose this battle, the result will be the annihilation of your entire tribe. I think it is you mages who should be cautious." Wei Wuya lifted his chin, and said indifferently, "It seems further talk is useless. You leave no room for negotiation at all. Then a battle to the death is the only option. However, before that, let's have a duel first. Let both sides dispatch people to set up the restrictive barrier, regardless of the number of wins or losses. As soon as the challenge match is over, we will immediately go all out." The withered tree elder also said, speaking in a direct and straightforward manner. He probably also knew that at this point, trying to persuade the 3 great cultivators to back down was nothing more than wishful thinking. A challenge match is of course acceptable, but what about the prisoners you promised? If we don't see them, hey, what are you afraid of? The old devil stared at the elder and let out a cold sneer. Upon hearing the other party's words, the elder was taken aback, but after a moment of thought, his lips moved slightly as he sent a few words to the rear via voice transmission. Immediately, a commotion stirred in the ranks of spellcasters at the rear. Over 1,000 unarmed, aside from the clothes on their backs, cultivators with no other belongings, were pushed out from the ranks. As these cultivators reached the front, they all had different expressions. Some were red-faced with shame, while others glared angrily at the spellcasters. Meanwhile, in the great army of cultivators on the opposite side, a slight commotion also broke out. These captured cultivators were naturally recognized by many of their fellow sect members. After revered Ziyang and the others saw this and exchanged a glance, did their expression soften slightly as they nodded? So, you have seen the people. You can rest easy now. Right. Let's hurry up and start the wagered duel. That one among the Mulan Divine Masters, the short one, was growing impatient. Why is your excellency in such a rush? Could it be you plan to pull some tricks in this wagered duel? Wei Wuya said unexpectedly. If you don't dare to accept the wagered duel, we will just deal with these captives first, and then we will go to war. I wonder what the three of you think. The short man's expression changed. Are you actually threatening to blackmail us? A cold glint flashed in Wei Wuya's eyes. He said coldly, it's hardly blackmail. But, if you are unwilling to participate in the wagered duel, then there's no use for us to keep these prisoners. Using them as a sacrifice to the war banner to boost our morale is not out of the question. The bestial elder's expression remained unchanged, but his voice grew more sinister. We can agree to the wagered duel. Release these prisoners first, then we will agree to the duel. Upon hearing this, Supreme Master Jiang, after his brow twitched a few times, slowly said, release them. Do you think we would do something so foolish? The short man said bluntly, but we can't trust you either. What if after the wagered battle ends, you don't keep your promise? Wei Wuya said calmly, even if that's the case. Alright, that's enough. Let's not waste any more time on these useless words. Before the wagered battle, we can release half of the captives first. The rest will depend on whether you win or lose. You have no objections to this, do you? If this is still not acceptable, then you can just go back. We will declare war immediately. Just as the old man was waiting for what the short man would say, a fierce glint flashed in his eyes as he cut in, saying good. We'll do it this way then. Your side will release the people, and our side will begin setting up the restriction formation. This time, Master Jiang exchanged a few words with his two companions via voice transmission. Then he decisively agreed. These terms were the greatest concession the other party was willing to make. If the negotiations had truly broken down, they would have no way to answer to the multitude of cultivators behind them. Having agreed on the terms, the six of them returned to their respective camps to make arrangements. Han Li had already left his original position, hiding among a group of cultivators. Before the wagered battle began, he did not want to be noticed by the high-level mages on the opposing side. And just now, the discussion between Master Jiang's group and the Mulans, three divine masters, with Han Li's immense power, his divine sense naturally heard everything clearly. As a result, after a faint smile appeared on Han Li's lips, those cultivators who were pushed out, a portion of them had the restrictions on their bodies removed by the mages. Then, with looks of pleasant surprise, they flew towards the opposite side. However, Master Jiang had clearly made arrangements in advance. Before these cultivators could fly into the main army, several hundred cultivators had already come out to meet them. They carefully inspected these rescued cultivators, after confirming there were no spies among them, and that they hadn't been tampered with in any way. Only then did they allow them to rejoin the cultivator ranks. These fellows from Tian Nan are really cautious. Fortunately, back then we didn't make these cultivators take the mind-losing pills. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult to pass their inspection. The short man saw this scene from a distance, and snorted resentfully. That's to be expected. The three great cultivators of Tian Nan, not to be trifled with. It's best not to use such petty tricks. Strike the snake at its vital point. Otherwise, our cleverness will backfire. The scholar Jew said in agreement. Upon hearing this, the grim, beastly elder showed no expression. He merely stroked his sparse goatee, gazing at the cultivator army on the other side. His figure remained completely still. Under Han Li's distant gaze, a group of cultivators and mages flew out from their respective camps. They then spread out to 10 locations in the area between the two great armies, and began to set up their magic arrays. These people were all from among the cultivators and mages, array masters proficient in the art of formations. The restrictive barrier formation to be set up, although extremely powerful, was not an unorthodox type of array. Therefore, with these people's skill in formations, any tricks from the opposing side would be obvious at a glance. Normally, setting up this kind of barrier is very time-consuming, but with so many array masters working simultaneously, and sparing no expense on various precious materials and some already refined formation plates and formation flags to assist, in just a quarter of an hour, 10 small magic arrays, shimmering with white light, had already taken shape. Immediately after, the array masters from both sides jointly activated the formations, 10 of them, covering an area of 700 to 800 feet. White domes of light appeared between the two armies. After these array masters checked them over once more, and determined there were no issues, they all withdrew one after another, and in their place came 10 core formation stage, cultivators and mages who came forward together. It was arranged so that each cultivator and one mage would jointly supervise the operation of one magic formation. Among them, one of the Tian Nan cultivators. It was the woman surnamed Song from the Luo Yun sect, dressed in flowing white robes. She walked to one end, before the second to last formation array. Seeing this scene, Han Li's face showed no sign of surprise. This woman had walked to that formation array, which meant she was going to that very array to participate in a duel. After all, only a disciple from their own sect could make these old monsters participating in the battlefield at ease. Otherwise, if the dispatched cultivator was a disciple from a rival sect, and they refused to help in a moment of danger, or were unwilling to advance, it would be a complete disaster. Therefore, the appearance of the woman surnamed Song was actually proposed by Han Li himself. After all, the other disciples of the Luo Yun sect he was not very familiar with. The grand formation was now complete. Naturally, the combatants for the wagered battle from both sides appeared together. From the opposing formation's camp, first flew out 10 figures shrouded in black robes. A sinister yin energy permeated from each of these people, and their demonic cha was astounding. Demonic cultivators. Han Li's pupils contracted. He muttered under his breath. But then, with a flash of clear light from his body, he transformed into a streak of cyan and red light and shot out from the cultivators' camp. Other cultivators were making the same move as him. The Nascent Soul old eccentrics. Han Li had seen most of them before. Only 2 or 3 faces were unfamiliar. Jinren Suhun, old devil Yunlu, and that woman surnamed Bai were among them. These people flew to the formations they had chosen, and slowly came to a halt in midair. He held a glowing object that shone towards the sky. He first looked down at the one controlling the formation. The messenger woman nodded. Then he calmly looked towards the black-robed person opposite him. A bit strange. Why is the demonic aura on him so berserk? Could he have taken beforehand a potent elixir similar to the Huxiao pill? On the surface, Han Li remained expressionless, but he began to ponder inwardly. If it was merely this, he wouldn't be afraid of anything. The black-robed person opposite him had an ordinary build, but his 2 eyes flashed with a cold green light, staring at Han Li without so much as a blink. Although he was unable to see the other's face clearly, he was undoubtedly a Nascent Soul cultivator. His cultivation was at the peak of the early Nascent Soul stage, and had not yet advanced to the mid-stage. After observing him, Han Li's gaze shifted, and he glanced at the other few black-robed demonic cultivators nearby. They all seemed to be on par with their opponents, even if there were some differences. The gap wasn't significant. A thought struck Han Li, and his guard went up immediately. It seemed there was truly something wrong with this betting duel. These demonic cultivators. Surprisingly, not a single one of them was a mid-Nascent Soul stage cultivator. But it didn't matter. The moment his opponent used any demonic arts, he would immediately unleash the evil-warding divine lightning to instantly annihilate him. No matter what other tricks his opponent had, it would all be useless. In an instant, Han Li's killing intent surged. He had already settled on a plan in his mind. Just at that moment, the black-robed cultivator across from him suddenly took a storage pouch from his waist. Then he gave Han Li an emotionless glance. Han Li smiled faintly. He also took out a storage pouch filled with the duel's materials. The materials in this pouch had been gathered by the 4 great powers of the heavenly south. Their value was so great that even Han Li felt a bit envious seeing them. The black-robed man opposite him raised a hand and threw the storage pouch directly over. Han Li's eyes narrowed. Also throughout the storage bag in his hand, they exchanged them with each other. The materials in the opponent's storage bag were not as varied as the ones in his own, but in terms of rarity and value, they were clearly a cut above. This was more or less as stated in their challenge letter. There was nothing amiss. Han Li nodded. He did not return the materials, and directly attached this storage bag to his waist. The black-robed person opposite him did the same. Seeing this, the woman surnamed Song and the mage across from her below began chanting an incantation at the same time. Their hands continuously formed seals. After a spell seal struck the formation, the white light barrier upon it flickered a few times, and then abruptly vanished. Han Li and the black-robed person moved almost identically. Their figures flickered, and then both appeared inside the formation at the same time. This took both of them by surprise. They glanced at each other. Then, the hazy white light screen reappeared. separating the two of them from everything outside. Meanwhile, the other cultivators and black-robed people had also entered the light barriers in pairs. For a moment, the great army of cultivators and mages watching from afar fell completely silent. Everyone held their breath, feeling a bit tense. He looked at the two somewhat blurry figures in the light. He entered the light. Han Li then ignored the others' battles. He just calmly watched the black-robed person opposite him. His figure was completely still, but the azure light on his body was circulating. Sword formation. The many flying swords within his body also began to tremble on their own, ready to fly out and strike the enemy at any moment. Of course, facing the demonic cultivator's sharpest magic treasure, the evil warding divine thunder, it had long since gathered into a fist-sized golden orb of light. In Han Li's Danshan, it was being held in the smiling hands of his Nascent Soul, ready to deliver an earth-shattering blow at any time. When the black-robed person opposite saw the light reappear, he stopped talking and formed a hand seal. A low and ancient incantation sound came from his mouth. The chilly demonic chi on his body surged wildly. His arms instantly transformed into pitch-black tentacles, and they began to dance about wildly. Han Li's eyes narrowed. He stared motionlessly at his opponent, but his hands, hidden within his sleeves, emitted faint crackling sounds, as a faint golden light flickered. When dealing with demonic cultivators, Han Li had long been confident in his ability to instantly kill those of the same rank. Just seize the opening in the opponent's attack, and you can kill them in a single blow. But in that split second, the black-robed person's pupils turned crimson. A beast-like roar also erupted from their mouth. Finally, the demonic energy around its body dispersed. The body beneath the black robe actually began to swell. In the blink of an eye, its body more than doubled in size. Seeing this, he was slightly startled. It wasn't because of the change in the opponent's size, but because of its demonic energy. It had vanished without a trace in an instant. In its place was a strange and deeply unsettling aura. A crazed look appeared in the black-robed person's blood-red eyes. Its swollen body suddenly began to shrink again. In a flash, it turned into a 3-foot-tall dwarf, and its figure instantly shot towards the back wall. He was startled. His mind raced. He had a faint, ominous feeling. He threw up both his hands. Two thick golden arcs shot out from his palms, forming a giant golden net in midair. It flew straight down to ensnare the black-robed person. Then, he immediately flicked his sleeve. A small blue shield flew out from his cuff. It transformed into a shield, blocking the way before him, and with his other hand, he slapped the storage bag at his waist. The golden spider fell into the palm of his hand. If the situation seemed wrong, he would immediately send out this spider to break through the restriction and leave this place, knowing full well the opponent was about to pull a trick. He wasn't about to be constrained here. Just as Han Li's mind was racing, the black-robed person, under the golden electric net, let out a blood-curdling scream. With a loud bang, their entire body inexplicably exploded. Every inch of their body turned into a bloody mist, splattering in all directions. Han Li was startled at first, but he was immediately stunned. He had originally thought the opponent was trying to use some kind of vicious self-destruction secret technique, but all the opponent's flesh and blood splattered onto the screen wall. It didn't affect his side at all. It looked as if it had no power whatsoever. As Han Li was puzzled, he became somewhat astonished. But then, he noticed something unusual. All of the opponent's bloody mist and minced flesh was stuck to the screen wall opposite him, showing no sign of falling off at all. And as he watched, it began to squirm bizarrely on the screen wall. Seeing this, Han Li was somewhat stunned. A few splattering sounds were heard. That flesh and blood suddenly turned into clumps of a bloody substance, and began to spread along the screen wall. Its speed was incredibly fast. In the blink of an eye, it turned the white light screen a deep blood-red color, and it emitted a bloody stench so pungent it made one want to gag. Han Li was shocked to his core. He hurriedly took the static pearl in his hand and toward the barrier behind him, smashed it fiercely. With a loud bang, the moment the static pearl made contact with the barrier, it exploded into a pitch-black, lightless mass. Afterward, that section of the barrier flickered unstably. The entire light screen began to tremble slightly. Han Li was overjoyed to see this. His index finger flicked continuously, sending out 10 streaks of azure light. They struck the same spot one after another. As the white light flashed, the barrier seemed on the verge of shattering. Just as he was feeling overjoyed in his heart, a flash of blood-red light appeared before his eyes. A large patch of the bloody mist flashed over. It completely covered the barrier before him, turning it a deep blood-red. Han Li's heart sank in silence. He raised his head and looked all around. Only then did he realize the entire barrier of light had turned blood-red. Above, a blood mist churned. Thick droplets of blood condensed out of thin air. The stench of blood instantly intensified. He had no time to think. After a thunderous sound came from his open mouth, a golden arc as thick as a bowl shot out. It struck the blood-red mist before him. After the golden light exploded, the blood mist dispersed slightly, but it immediately returned to its original state, as if it were completely unharmed. This greatly surprised Han Li, the wind and cloud-cleansing sword he had intended to unleash. He paused for a moment. A grave expression appeared on his face. At the same time, the scene of an opponent self-destructing to turn the light barrier blood-red was playing out simultaneously in 10 arenas. The 10 cultivators participating in the gambling battles were caught completely off guard. All of them were trapped inside a barrier of light. The 10 people below who were supervising the formation's operation, along with a few other cultivators, naturally knew that the situation was dire. While warily watching the enemy spellcasters opposite them, they hurriedly attempted to shut down the formation, but to their great surprise, upon seeing the barriers of light turned blood-red, these spellcasters said not a single word, immediately turned around and left the formation, and flew directly back to their own formation. At this moment, the woman from the Song clan, instead of feeling relieved, realized that the situation had become serious. It seemed the change in the light shield was definitely the work of those spellcasters, and just as they had predicted, although the formation had been stopped by a spell, the blood shield in the sky still eerily remained, and the blood mist began to churn. The walls of the shield were covered in a thick layer of blood, smearing the entire surface of the shield. It was as if the blood of hundreds of people had been used on it all at once. The sight was truly terrifying. Seeing this scene, Revered Jiang and the others naturally felt their hearts sink. When even those 10 cultivators could not stop the formation, they could no longer remain calm. They suddenly transformed into 3 dazzling streaks of light, and shot out directly. Go down. This is not something you can handle. He then flew above the formation. After Revered Jiang glanced at the transformed light shield, he said with a grim expression. The cultivators below breathed a great sigh of relief upon hearing this, and hurriedly flew back to their own formation. Meanwhile, the woman from the Song clan looked at the blood shield where Han Li was. A look of worrying flashed by. He also left helplessly. On the opposing side were the withered old man and others from the mage faction. After having just trapped Han Li and the others, a hint of excitement naturally flashed across his face. Now, the 3 great mages flew together to the formation's location. His face remained calm and composed. He seemed not the least bit worried that the 3 great cultivators had the ability to break the blood cover, and behind them, at some unknown time, a man and a woman in black robes had appeared. Sect Master, you really succeeded. I hope the blood luo cover is truly as powerful as your esteemed sect claims, able to trap 10 Nascent Soul cultivators inside for half a day. Once Tian Nan loses these 10 people, its strength will naturally be greatly diminished, and half a day's time is enough for us to have a decisive battle with the Tian Nan cultivators. The withered old man turned his head and said to the black-robed man with a dry laugh, "Rest assured, this blood luo cover is one of my sect's 6 great secret arts. Not only does it require the sacrifice of 10 blood mages who have been raised for 100 years, but also to prevent the other side from becoming suspicious. We had these blood mages specially consume the demonic spirit pill. Then we, including myself as the sect master, allowed them to attack at will, while controlling them with our divine sense. That is how we received their probes. To go to such great lengths, even going so far as to sacrifice that wisp of my divine spirit, I am naturally completely confident, and for good reason. For a late-stage cultivator to try and break this barrier would be no small feat. They couldn't possibly succeed even after a good few minutes. And would you even give them that chance?" The black-robed man glanced at the old man, and spoke with a cold sneer, as if to prove the black-robed man's words. In the distance, Supreme Master Ziyang struck down at the blood barrier. Then he slashed lightly. A blinding streak of sword che thrust downwards. After a series of violent rumbles, the blood barrier only trembled slightly, and then returned to its original state. This made the Supreme Master's expression darken at once. When the others, Wei Wuya and Old Devil He Huan, saw this, they lost any intention of attacking. With their level of insight, even though only one of them had tested it, they could immediately gauge the defensive strength of this blood barrier. This strange blood barrier was incredibly resilient, and it seemed to have some other oddity laid upon it. It was truly not easy to break. However, from that single slash, the 3 of them could also see that the barrier was designed only to trap enemies, and had no offensive capabilities. This made the 3 of them exchange a glance and give a bitter smile. They originally thought the opponent would in battle use a named poison fighting technique, and unleash a powerful killing move to severely injure them. but they never expected that the opponent intended from the very beginning to temporarily trap the three of them. This caught the three old monsters completely off guard. They had somewhat miscalculated. The preparations they made in advance were instantly rendered useless. Brother Yi, what kind of demonic technique is this? Your 6 sects of the demonic path don't have this kind of technique, do they? It actually requires someone to self-destruct to cast this spell. This was truly something we didn't anticipate beforehand. Wei Wuya sighed and asked slowly, no, this is the first time I've ever seen such a strange secret technique. It seems the Jin Kingdom's cultivators are truly not to be underestimated. Old Demon Kahuan said with a deep frown. As the three of them grew vexed, they were in no mood to question the other party about anything, because from within the great army of spellcasters opposite them, the sound of war drums began to ring out. A portion of the spellcasters took to the sky and hovered in midair. Meanwhile, the spellcasters on the ground also began to change their positions, and the sound of a sudden downpour could be heard. Assuming an offensive stance, the cultivator army at the rear also saw it. That strange scene of a solo battle. But under the guidance of the high-level cultivators, they did not fall into disarray. The formations, equally prepared to respond, began to move. Spiritual lights of various colors began to flash within the cultivators' camp. We suffered a great loss this time. Fortunately, they are only temporarily trapped. Their lives are not in danger. As long as we can drag this out a bit longer, they'll still have a chance to get out. The number of our high-level cultivators was already greater than that of the Mulan people. Even without those 10, we won't be any weaker than the mages, said the Hewan Elder Devil after some thought. What is meant by boundless? Although he knew that Master Jiang's words were mostly to console himself, but at this point, he could only accept it helplessly. Of course, the two of them were naturally quite furious inside. Alright, the great battle below doesn't need our command. We just need to do our best to hold back the Mulan Divine Masters. A vicious glint flashed across the Hewan Elder Devil's face, as he said grimly. Then, he ignored the other two, and raised a hand towards the opposing army of mages, shouting loudly, I have long heard of the Mulan Divine Master's heaven-reaching spiritual arts. Unfathomable. The three of us would like to test your skills. I wonder if you Divine Masters are willing to come out for a battle. The Hewan Old Devil let out a mighty roar. He had clearly used some kind of secret art. It was like a clap of thunder on a clear day. It shook the sky for miles around, causing the ground to hum and tremble. For a moment, it drowned out the barrage of attacks from both sides. Even those cultivators who had taken to the sky, some with weaker cultivation bases, faltered in the air, nearly plummeting to the ground. Hearing the Hewan Old Devil's challenge, the gaunt old man furrowed his brow. But then he spoke as if it were nothing. A battle with the three great cultivators of Tian Nan is inevitable. However, I must remain here to command the main battle. I cannot accept the challenge. I'll have to trouble Sect Master Fang for this. I have long heard that the Sect Master's heavenly slaughter true devil art has been cultivated to an extremely high level. You can even channel the true demonic Che of the heavenly fiend true devil to possess you. I imagine dealing with one of them should be a simple matter, since I have already made an agreement with you. As the Sect Master, I will naturally take action. I would also like to witness for myself the divine abilities of Tian Nan's #1 demonic cultivator. The man in black robes said coldly as a green light flashed in his eyes. His body, enveloped in black Che, slowly ascended into the sky, flew toward the other side. Zhongshan rushing and by Din the dwarf, without another word, transformed into a silver-red streak, and a ball of red light, and followed after them. Seeing this, Master Ziyang and his two companions on the other side simultaneously transformed into brilliant streaks of light, and fled high into the sky. The man in the black robe and Divine Master Mulan gave close chase. The 6 of them disappeared into the clouds and missed in the blink of an eye, vanishing without a trace. But it wasn't long before the nearby sky began to change color. One moment fiery red, the next pitch black, and thunderous explosions began to erupt. Flashes of silver and red light streaked across the sky. The 6 great cultivators in the sky were fighting, and at low altitude and on the ground, the cultivators and the great army of law masters also began a massive battle. However, this was not like a magical duel between one or a few cultivators, who would immediately fly up to approach their opponent and attack with their magical artifacts. Instead, from such a great distance, amidst the rising and falling sounds of incantations, the cultivator and law master camps first simultaneously activated various protective formations. One by one, huge shields of light slowly rose from the formations of both sides, enveloping the main forces of both sides within. Clearly, the cultivator side completed their defenses first. This wasn't to say that the cultivator's 5 element spells were faster to cast than the mage's spells. It was just that the defensive magic formations deployed by the Tian Nan cultivators were mostly comprised of formation apparatus. As a result, they were naturally activated a good deal faster than the opponent's spells. Long Han, who was presiding over the great battle, seeing this, gave the order without a moment's hesitation. They launched their attack first. The first to attack were more than 10 types of long-range, area of effect treasures. Among them was the giant bronze gong that Han Li had seen before. At this moment, the frame holding the bronze gong had not only already moved to the very front of the cultivator ranks, but had also lightly floated up into the air, hovering at a height of over 100 feet from the ground. Nearby, only 7 or 8 burly, yellow-shirted men stood guard on either side. The giant man who had been sitting cross-legged beside the bronze gong had stood up at some point. He held an iron hammer about 10 feet long, standing silently a short distance to one side of the gong. 2 men raised a triangular black banner 50 to 60 feet high. It shimmered with a dark light, and on it was a black flood dragon, embroidered with lifelike detail. 9 young women in red robes. Each held a tray covered with red brocade. The trays were bulging on top. It was unknown what treasures they held, but these 9 young women formed a strange formation and floated lightly in the air. 3 elders in brocade robes each carried a gourd half a man's height on their back, with their eyes half closed. They also walked to the very front of the group. The order to attack was instantly given to these cultivators responsible for the first wave of the attack. The burly man on the bronze frame immediately widened his eyes. His whole body erupted with a long yellow light as he swung the iron hammer with both hands and struck the center of the bronze gong fiercely. A blinding golden light erupted, but strangely, there was only a flash of light, without a single sound, and the moment that ball of golden light appeared, it burst open, transforming into spakes of golden starlight shooting toward the other side. But they only flew for a dozen or so jong. Then, soft popping sounds were heard. The golden spakes turned into clusters of golden mist. The burly man's hammer struck relentlessly. A dense barrage of golden spakes also shot out from the gong. The golden mist surged forth like waves, rushing toward the enemy army of spellcasters, as the cultivators frantically shook the triangular black sail. A black jow, a dragon faintly materialized from the patterns on its face. This charming demon's gaze was unexpectedly righteous. Gust after gust of blue-black demonic wind spewed leisurely from its gaping maw. The howling of the wind erupted. Gusts of the hurricane transformed into a vast expanse of darkness. In an instant, sand flew and stones rolled, making it impossible for anyone to see. The girl in red simultaneously lifted the red disc in her hands with her fair arms. A melodious incantation issued from her lips. A flash of red light. 9 brilliant red copper plates suddenly flew out from the disc. They gathered together in midair, and then spun around rapidly. A fiery red ancient mirror, several feet wide, appeared right there. Spiritual light shimmered on the mirror's surface, spewing countless fist-sized fire birds from within. Each one was wreathed in flames, spitting fire from their beaks. Then, after a chorus of clear cries, they shot forth like arrows. After the 3 brocade-robed elders formed a triangle, they simultaneously activated the giant gourds on their backs. A bone-chilling white frosty mist, mixed with countless snowflakes and hailstones, instantly turning the large area in front of them into a world of ice and snow, and blew toward the opposite side with incredible speed. These attacks were launched almost simultaneously. The opposing spellcasters had just barely formed their defensive barrier. The light shield could only defend, unable to counterattack. Under the command of the withered hand elder, they could only receive this round of attacks. Instantly, the attack struck with great force. At the moment of contact, the black wind and other attacks almost simultaneously exploded upon the protective light of the cultivator army. For a moment, lights of various colors flashed. The spellcasters' army's protective shield trembled slightly. Lu Han witnessed this scene, and without a second thought, he issued another command. Having received the order, the cultivators waited for the first wave of attacks to end. Then they immediately launched a second wave of attacks. This time, the attack was a large-scale assault jointly unleashed by the various sects. Several pillars of multicolored light and a monstrous demonic fire erupted from the cultivators' formation. They instantly merged with the first wave's magical treasure attacks, covering the entire spellcaster encampment. The spellcaster's protective light shield was completely submerged beneath these relentless and successive attacks. The withered hand elder's expression turned grim. He had never imagined that just by activating their spiritual arts, a single step slower than their opponent, they would immediately be forced into taking a beating. The opponent's offensive was so ferocious. For a moment, he was also unable to spare any mages to immediately launch a counterattack. under such a terrifying offensive. If not for the protection of the restrictive spell formation, even a Nascent Soul stage cultivator would never dare to face these attacks. Lady Lu, it seems we must deploy your giant beasts, otherwise we will not be able to seize the initiative, the old man suddenly said to the woman in black robes beside him. Since the sect master has already lent those giant beasts to you, fellow Taoist, please just use them. There is no need to specifically inform me. After the woman in black robes gave a slight smile, she spoke nonchalantly. The old man nodded in satisfaction upon hearing this. He immediately gave the order. After a burst of earth-shattering roars, over 10 enormous figures braced themselves against all kinds of attacks and charged out from the magic formation's protective shield. They were precisely those armored, primordial giant beasts. As soon as these giant beasts emerged, they immediately charged madly toward the cultivators' main camp. As for the attacks from the cultivators' side, a portion of them were naturally redirected, aiming to attack these giant beasts. The spells from the mage camp involuntarily slowed for a moment. Seizing this opportunity, dozens of high-rank mages hurriedly flew out. At the same time, he sent out dozens of multicolored, egg-shaped pellets. He began to mutter an incantation. An incredible scene unfolded. Some of these pellets fell straight to the ground, sinking in and disappearing from sight. Others spun rapidly before being enveloped in a clear light. Still others directly condensed into a ball of clear water, or burst into flames on their own, engulfed in a raging fire. Then, from the ground, from within the clear light, and from the water and fire, they materialized out of thin air, taking on various forms. There were yellow-furred beasts, a massive firewolf, 70 to 80 feet tall, a hazy, cyan-colored strange bird with an ethereal form, and a blue demon shrouded in water mist. As soon as these demonic beasts appeared, they immediately followed behind the savage behemoths, also charging toward the opposing army of cultivators. Those behemoths, due to their naturally tough hides and the battle armor they wore, were also protected by various defensive spells. So, even though they were hit by all sorts of spells, causing them to roar endlessly, and were covered in wounds in the blink of an eye, they miraculously never fell. But the materialized monsters behind them were not so fortunate. Although they look equally imposing, after just one round of attacks, the bodies of most were shattered, turning into spakes of spiritual light and vanishing without a trace. And those pellets that had greatly lost their spiritual energy fell directly to the dust. But the high-level mages acted as if they didn't see it. At the same time, with another raise of their heads, another batch of pellets was thrown out. After chanting the incantation, monsters were born once again, one after another. They charged forward fiercely, unafraid of death. At this, the expressions of many cultivators changed slightly. The spells aimed at these monsters were endless, and even intensified somewhat, and for the mages faction, the pressure was greatly reduced. Seeing this situation, Longhan's expression darkened slightly. He hastily wanted to give some orders, but it was a little too late. The sobbing old man had finally seized the opportunity. With a single command, they had long since prepared their next tactic. It was to switch to offensive-type spiritual arts. Instantly, spiritual lights of all colors flared up, amidst the sound of a torrential downpour. Huge fireballs, each 10 feet in diameter, ice lances as thick as small trees, began to condense and take shape in the sky above. As he watched this scene, Longhan muttered to himself, "We can no longer keep them suppressed." His lips barely moved as he sent a voice transmission.